in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, मलनाडु टीवी इंडिया, न्यूज गांव से, संवाद सरोकार न्यूज, भारत पोस्ट न्यूज, organ donation India Foundation and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today's topic is not only current, very relevant and very hot. And the topic is federalism, challenge and response. But before I will go on the main topic, I would like to inform you that today world is celebrating Global Wind Day. Global Wind Day is a worldwide event that is held on June 15th around the world. It is organized by Wind Europe and GWEC, Global Wind Energy Council. It is a day when wind energy is celebrated, information is exchanged, and adults and children find out about wind energy, its power and the possibilities it holds to change the world. In association with EWEA and GWEC, National Wind Energy Associations and companies involved in wind energy production organize events in many countries around the world. India's Jaisalmer Wind Park is one of the largest wind farm in the world. The Mudampandal wind farm in Kanyakumari is also among the top 10. We are also observing World Elder Abuse Awareness Day today. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is an annual initiative launched on June 15, 2006 by the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health Organization. In its resolution, the United Nations General Assembly designated that date as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, a day in which the entire world voices its opposition to any form of abuse of the older generation. The main objective of this day is to provide an opportunity for communities around the globe to promote a better understanding of abuse and neglect of older persons by creating awareness of the cultural, social, economic, and demographic processes affecting elder abuse and neglect. Media conference with Lal Goel wishes you on Global Wind Day and hopes that by observing World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, more and more awareness will be created so that elders will not be abused and neglected. Now coming to the main topic, the federalism, challenge and response. Federalism is not about states' rights. It is about dividing power to better protect individual liberty. Federalism is a mixed or compound mode of government that combines a general government, the central or federal government, with state governments in a single political system. Its distinctive features, first embodied in the Constitution of the United States of 1789, is a relationship of parity between the two levels of government established. It can thus be defined as a form of government in which powers are divided between two levels of government of equal status. Federalism differs from confederalism, in which the general level of government is subordinate to the regional level, and from devolution within a unitary state, in which the regional level of government is subordinate to the general level. It represents the central form in the pathway of regional integration or separation, bounded on the less integrated side by confederationalism and on the more integrated side by devolution within a unitary state. Federalism in India refers to relations between the union government and the states of the Union of India. The Constitution of India establishes the structure of the Indian government. Part 11 of the Indian Constitution specifies the distribution of legislative, administrative, and executive powers between the union government and the states of India. The legislative powers are categorized under a union list, a state list, and a concurrent list, representing respectively the powers conferred upon the union government, those conferred upon the state governments, and powers shared among them. This federalism is symmetrical in that the developed powers of the constituent units are envisioned to be the same. Historically, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was accorded a status different from other states owing to an explicitly temporary provision of the Indian Constitution, namely Article 370, which was revoked by the Parliament in 2019. Union territories are unitary type, directly governed by the Union government. Article 1, subclause 1 of the Constitution stipulates two-tier governance with an additional local elected government. Delhi and Puducherry were accorded legislatures under Article 239A and 239A respectively. The fundamental rights of citizens are the same throughout India. Political scientist Philip Mahmood has argued that in culturally diverse developing countries like India, federalism is chosen not merely for administrative requirements, but for the very survival of the nation. However, despite possessing a keen understanding of the multidimensional nature of India's vast diversities, the framers of Indian Constitution refrained from creating a fully federalized political system in India at the time of the country's independence because of their fear of further disunity and secessionist tendencies in the country, which was already being subjected to partition. During the Constituent Assembly debates, the first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, cautioned that it would be injurious to the interests of the country to provide for a weak central authority which would be incapable of ensuring peace, of coordinating vital matters of common concern, and of speaking effectively for the whole country in the international sphere. Other prominent members of the assembly also demanded a strong union government necessary for India's survival and political stability, given its vast diversity based on religion, language, caste, and ethnicity. It is incorrect, however, to conclude that India's constitutional structure is entirely tilted towards empowering the union government over the states. There exist some highly crucial federal features in the Indian Constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar assured the Constituent Assembly, the Constitution is a federal constitution. The union is not a league of states, nor is the states the agencies of the union, deriving powers from it. Both the union and the states are created by the Constitution. Both derive their respective authority from the Constitution, unquote. To govern such a diverse polity, a structure of asymmetrical federalism was adopted. And to discuss this very, very important topic today, that is the federalism challenge and response, we have a very elite, knowledgeable experts in this field, our panelists today. And I would like to invite my first panelist guest. He is Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS is one-man expert commission on labor to prepare an action plan for the welfare and development of the workforce in the context of COVID-19. He is also the principal advisor, Government of India Heritage Project. He was former head of disaster management, Government of India, and Central Draft Relief Commissioner, Government of India. He was the Vice Chancellor of National Museum, University of Delhi. He has authored 40 books in English, Malayalam, and Hindi, including novels, short stories, and essays. 4 of his books have become bestsellers. 4 books on Vastu and architecture and 1 book on housing received prestigious the Sharjah International Book Fair Award. Dr. Bose is an housing expert, innovator, writer, orator, and visionary. The path-breaking institutions set up by him, such as Nimriti Kendra, Building Center, District Tourism Council, and Habitat Alliance, have been replicated at the state, national, and global level. He was the head of the prestigious Supreme Court Committee on the Treasures of Sri Padmavaswamy Temple. Dr. Bose addressed United Nations General Assembly and specialized sessions 5 times on various international issues. Dr. Bose is a recipient of 31 national and international awards, including United Nations Global Best Practice Award. He also received prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship. Kerala government termed him Lord of Ideas. Former Prime Minister Mr. Manmohan Singh called him inspired civil servant, and our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi called him Man of Ideas. Welcome, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, on our show. Dr. Bose, you being such a senior bureaucrat, as well as you are still with the government as a advisor, as well as you are heading one-man expert commission. And you have seen the federalism very closely from both the sides, from the union government side as well as from the state government side. So now we would like to know from you your views on the federalism challenge and response. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, please.
The Canadian statesman Lester B. Pearson once said, "It is easy to frame a constitution, but difficult to make it work." And that applies to all constitutions in the world. India has a constitution which is drafted very carefully and which is considered to be one of the best in the world. But again, the problem of making it work manifests itself in different guises over the years, even now. India has accepted the British model or the UK model for its parliamentary democratic system. But we have not inherited from them or borrowed from them or adopted from them the unitary structure to the government. We went in for a federal structure. In this respect, we are more akin to the United States of America, of course, with substantial differences in content. For instance, we have not adopted the presidential form of government from the US. So we have a unique constitution which is rooted in the federal concepts. India means the union government and the state governments. Of course, there are the union territories which came in later, which form part of the union government for administrative matters. Now, when federalism is defined, there are various aspects of it which should be considered. Technically, the 7th schedule to the Constitution defines the legislative contours between the union and the states. We have a union list which consists of, if my memory is right, 98 subjects on which the absolute right for legislation lies with the government of India, the union government. Second is a state list. I think 58 or 59 subjects are listed here, where the legislative sovereignty lies with the states. And there is a concurrent list where the central government or the union government or the state government can legislate. In case of a dispute, the decision of the parliament will prevail. Fairly well-defined borders are there. And now, but when it comes to practice, as we know, there are fissures, there are ruptures, there are conflicts, and there are flashpoints also once in a while which emerge. This is part of democracy because we are an evolving democracy. Changes may come. But even about the definition of federalism, the Supreme Court itself has expressed differing views. I think in the 60s, in the case of Bengal versus Union of India, the Supreme Court took the stand that India is not federal in nature. But this was changed by the 9-member judge in the S.R. Bommai versus Union of India later in the 80s. There it is clearly stated that federalism forms the basic structure of the Constitution of India, which cannot be altered. There we stand. Then why this conflict once in a while? Conflicts are there in the legislative field. There are areas where the states have protested that the central government, the parliament has legislated on matters which are not entirely within its purview. There are also instances where the decisions taken or legislations made on the subjects in the concurrent list are also meant to be or described as transgressions into the territory of the states. The turf war is always there. But as we know, whenever there is a conflict like this, there is a doctrine of pith and substance. It either legislation analyzes pith and substance, whether it falls within the union interest or whether it falls within the area of the states. So there are built-in checks and balances to run the country as a truly federal nation. But the conflict arises basically in the matter of devaluation of finances, as you know. And of course, our learned, distinguished civil servant, Sir Sukumar Uman, is there. I think he will dwell more at length on this. So the basic crux of it is sharing the resources, sharing the finances. That is where all the heat, the sound and fury which arises in politics. There are certain set patterns and institutions which govern the devolution of financial resources between the union and the center. The major instrument is the Finance Commission. It's a recommendations. As you know, the total revenue, only 41% is shared to the states. For that also, there are some formula. It also depends on the state domestic product. If the state is not economically well, like for instance, Kerala, if it does not have a good manufacturing industry, if the state domestic product is less, it does not get more share, even as per the Finance Commission's recommendations. This applies to all the states together, but those states who feel they are more sin against and sinning will certainly protest. And like Oliver Twist, they want more. Every state wants more of finances. Now, there are also certain other areas where the center gives finances to the states, not whimsically. There are the centrally sponsored schemes. It can be 100% centrally sponsored, 50%, 75%, 25%. But the state also has to come in with a matching assistance. When they fail to do that, they don't get the central assistance. That is another area of conflict. Even if the states have provided for matching assistance for the centrally sponsored schemes, unless they give utilization certificate for the amount or tranche which is already released, they will not get it. But these are all misrepresented. In politics, nothing is black and white. There are shades of gray. In center-state relations, especially in defining federalism, more than that, in working out federalism, this kind of issues always come up. Now, to be specific, one of the major bonds of contentions is that the center is bound to compensate for the states for the heavy loss in GST. But now, because of pandemic, this loss has come, and central government is taking the stand that it is an act of God, that they cannot compensate the entire loss which has been made on account of pandemic. And of course, there are other areas where finances can be shared. Special packages are given to certain states. This is, of course, done a bit on political considerations, not entirely on political considerations. So on the legal side, on the legislative side, on the financial side, there are conflicts which arise. Another area of conflict is the governors. You said today is the day of the, what is that? Abuse against elders. Yes. That is applicable to all the governors. Some of the elders abuse, some of the elders are abused. And we see this conflict is a recurring conflict. Now in Maharashtra, yes. In Maharashtra, when Uddhav Thackeray wanted to be nominated to the Legislative Council, see, without it, he cannot continue as Chief Minister. Either he has to get elected or get nominated. The governor did not do it so easily. Then the Chief Minister had to seek the help of the Prime Minister. Issue is sorted out. You know what happened in Rajasthan? The governor's position. When Gehlot had a problem with Sachin and he was about to lose his, he did not get the support, or so he thinks, of the governor. Then this is what happened in Madhya Pradesh. In Madhya Pradesh also this happened. The governor took a tough stand. Finally, the Chief Minister had to resign. A new Chief Minister had to be sworn in. There are so many instances we start up. Perhaps the first is such major instance of the governor-state government conflict came from Dharamvira's case in West Bengal. I do not want to narrate it. And another thing is the whimsical dismissal of state governments. During Nehru's time, 6 or 7 times, state government, duly elected state governments were dismissed. The first victim was a duly elected communist government of the world, that is EMS Namboodiripat's communist government, which came into power in Kerala. They were dismissed. Indira Gandhi used to dismiss governments right, left, front and behind. This is an area of conflict. Now what you see, there are some chief ministers who take up the cudgel against the central government by fighting against the governor. This happens in West Bengal. The running battle is going on. In Kerala also it was there. But I think both the governor and the chief minister, being seasoned politicians, they seem to have arrived at some working relation, because recently there was a tweet by the chief minister complimenting the prime minister for the change in the COVID vaccination policy. I do not want to dwell at length on that, but we are an evolving democracy. So far as the center-state relations are concerned, there have many committees, including the Rajamanar committee, the Sachar committee. So many committees have come with recommendations. We are evolving, and I think India has internal strength and buoyancy to sort out minor problems which crop up from time to time and consolidate our position as the largest democracy in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anand Bose, for giving your views about the topic, and the topic is the federalism challenge and response. What Dr. Bose, I would just highlight few points. What he said is, according to him, the Indian Constitution, which is one of the best constitution in the world, has been taken from the UK, from the USA. All the best parts of those constitutions have been incorporated in our country's constitution. But there are many times it has happened when there are difference of opinions between the state government and the central government. And he has mentioned that the Supreme Court has clearly settled it properly in the Bombay case, where they says that India is a federal country. So it's a federalism is going to be there. Even he mentioned how the federalism is working in India. He says the central government gives the financial aids to the state government. Many times it happens the state governments wants more and more, while the central government, after all, they have to see all the states in the country. So it is not possible sometimes to give the requisite amount what they have asked. And then the conflict starts. He has also mentioned how the this GST thing has come now because of the pandemic. So much extra expenditures are there of the government, and that's why, and these governments are asking, the state governments are asking for the compensation which has been promised earlier by the central government. But because the central government stand is this act of God, so this duration of this has to be waived off. But the state government is asking for that. So there is a conflict like this. He also mentioned how the governor's role, which is very important in the state. And there also lots of conflicts are there. He has given the examples of Rajasthan. He has given the example of Maharashtra and other states. And he is still, right now the conflicts are on in Kerala as well as in West Bengal. So he says these types of conflicts are always there and going to be there. But it is like a family where their conflicts comes and it always been resolved. He also mentioned how the central government has overruled, or rather dismissed, the is duly elected governments. And he has given the data how in the time of Pandit Nehru or in the time of Indira Gandhi, how many governments have been dismissed due to those who were duly elected. And so he says, basically, it's a federal system in our country. Federalism is there. There are hiccups, there are difference of opinions, but the beauty of our country is we always resolve them after discussion, after some here and there, but we always try to resolve, and it always be resolved. Thank you very much, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, for giving your views. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Mr. Sukumar N. Oman, IAS. Mr. Sukumar N. Oman, IAS, is the former chairman and managing director of Madras Fertilizer Limited. He is the managing partner of Omega Alliance, law firm based in Kochi with specialization in tax, corporate laws, constitutional law, mercantile law, arbitration, and labor laws. He is of 1973 IAS batch. He was allotted Manipur Tripura cadre. He was the general manager, Central Island Water Transport Corporation, Kolkata, for 2 years. He was deputy chairman, Kochi Port Trust. He was controller, that is the chief executive officer, Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, Trivandrum. He was the principal secretary, state governments of Manipur, Tripura, and Kerala, in which he looked after the departments like transport, planning, health, public works, taxation, agriculture, energy, land revenue, land registration from 1990 to 2002. He was the chairman of Kerala State Electricity Board. He was the single member sales tax tribunal government of Tripura. Welcome, Mr. Sukumar Oman, on our show. Mr. Oman, you have heard what Dr. C.V. Anand Bose has mentioned. Now, we would like to know your views on the federalism challenges and response. Dr. Sukumar and Oman, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goel. I fully agree with my esteemed colleague, Ananda Bose. The Indian Constitution is perhaps one of the best constitutions. It was drafted by luminaries covering a wide spectrum. He also mentioned that there are difficulties. I would put the main difficulty as the lack of commitment on the part of people to see that this constitution should work as it was drafted. I would therefore like to take, as being a former civil servant and now as a practicing advocate, through some of the provisions of the constitution and the irritants that have surfaced. The preamble says, "We the people." That means every citizen of India under Article 5 of the Constitution, not only those who were citizens in 1950, who are citizens born after 1950, and who will be citizens hereafter, all of us bind ourselves to an oath that we owe allegiance to the Constitution. This legal fiction exists. No Indian citizen has an option to say, "I will not owe allegiance to the Constitution." The preamble also says that it is a democratic form of governance. In other words, we accept a federal form of government, the government in the center and the government in the states, that these governments reflect the will of the people. Article 1 says, and that is the article which defines the federal concept, it says this is a union of states. It's not a federation. When we say it is a union, the states have voluntarily become parties in this federal form of government. It is not federation through an agreement. Mr. Ambedkar, I'll just quickly quote this, which he had said in the drafting committee. This is in the Constituent Assembly Debates, Volume 7. Quote, "But I can tell you why the drafting committee wanted to make it clear that though India was to be a federation, the federation was not the result of an agreement by the states to join in a federation, and that the federation not being the result of an agreement, no state has the right to secede from it. The federation is a union because it is indestructible." No political party can advocate secession. That would be treason and a criminal offense. Article 53 says that the executive powers of the union are exercised through the president. Now, the executive power is not defined. It simply means the residue of governmental functions that are not either legislative or judicial. And this is an area of conflict. The corpus of authority, when we say the executive power is through the president, we must understand that the corpus of authority to govern, that rests in the elected government. And governance means determination of policy, execution of policy. An irritant in this matter is judicial activism. There are contrary, the Supreme Court has taken contrary positions. I would say that the better view of the Honorable Supreme Court is that the court should not interfere in policy matters. The policy is the will of the people. I would also submit with great humility and, of course, with great respect to the Honorable Supreme Court, that if the Supreme Court ventures into policy areas, that would also be transgressing the constitutional boundaries. Take, for example, the recent intervention in vaccine matters policy. I personally feel that that is a matter entirely within the domain of the elected government, the will of the people. The policy was determined by the union government in consultation with the state governments. There's no controversy on that. It would be wrong, and I say with great humility and respect, for the Supreme Court to question the policy before it has been debated in the House of the People. What is the will of the people? The will of the people, and that is a democratic form of government which we have accepted in our preamble. It says that the president will act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. That is Article 75. Prior to the 42nd Amendment, the president had some leeway, some discretionary power. Now he has absolutely no discretion. The advice of the Council of Ministers is binding on the president. The cabinet has accepted what is called the principle of collective responsibility. So if there is any member of the cabinet who disagrees with the policy of the government, he or she has no choice but to quit. The Prime Minister has a constitutional duty to inform the president of the decisions, the policy decisions of the government. And all this works very well. But the question is, how would people accept the concept of will of the people? How do governments accept it? I would add a word of caution, and where we see protests against the government of India, central government. Protests should not degenerate democracy. It should not lead to degeneration of democracy to anarchy. The will of the people can't be overruled on the streets. That would be a very dangerous threat. The proper thing is, when there are protests on the streets, for the elected representatives where these protests are held, to raise the matter in the House of the People. And if a policy deserves to be reconsidered, the House of the People will reconsider and take a decision. And so long as the union government has a majority, the will of the people must prevail. I personally have followed a policy, and that's because of my faith. I say, pray for the government in office that you may live in peace. That is the best way to pray for good governance. Another matter, on to use a current illustration, judicial intervention should not be treated as an oxygen concentrator to revive will of the people or to awake a government. I think the public representatives are quite conscious, even in these days of pandemic, the seriousness and how they should react. The business of government is also regulated under the Constitution. You have Article 77, the privileges of the House under Article 105, that the court cannot look into the proceedings of the House in Article 122. Then comes the role of the Supreme Court. My esteemed colleague Anand Bose and even the chairman, Mr. Goel, you said about the division of powers and legislative powers. There are a number of cases where there has been conflict on the legislative powers. In such a situation, it is the Supreme Court that acts as an umpire as to what is the meaning of a particular entry. under the 7th schedule? What are the powers? And the Supreme Court has the duty to define these powers so that one authority does not encroach into the domain of another authority. The principles by which this the entries are interpreted are now fairly well settled, and there is stability in judicial precedents. My friend mentioned about the GST and the 101st Amendment Act and the compensation. I think all state governments, and I mean, we must understand that the 101st Amendment was passed by Parliament, and the GST Council is a mechanism where decisions are taken unanimously. It's not a majority decision that prevails. And when the question of compensation to states arose, this was a concession which was granted by the central government to the states, that whatever loss they thought, whatever revenue they thought they would lose by switching over from VAT and service tax from the earlier regime to GST, that would be compensated through a compensation formula, and there was a compensation act which came into force along with the GST Act. I had the privilege of arguing a case before the Honorable High Court, which is now under appeal, where we have challenged certain provisions of the GST Act. And in a course of scrutiny of the revenues of the Kerala government, we presented before the Supreme Court, before the Honorable High Court, that the compensation that the government of Kerala had received from 2017-18, and the formula was the loss of revenue from 2014. The compensation that the state government had received or would receive far exceeded the revenue that they were collecting in normal course under the erstwhile tax regime. I would say it is not totally fair to criticize the government that because of compensation, the state's revenue has suffered a loss. There is another anomaly which I must mention. While the states are implementing the GST, they are also implementing the erstwhile laws. And this is the contradiction that we pointed out in the GST Act. So in one sense, the state governments are realizing revenue from the erstwhile acts and also realizing revenue through the GST and claiming compensation. I think the states are, to put it very crudely, fleecing the traders. Since the matter is before the division bench, I don't want to say anything further than this, but they are getting benefit which is not truly legitimate. The compensation is due to them, but right now I think the revenue is adequate. Everybody would like more revenue. And if you want the constitution to work, my colleague mentioned about the distribution of revenue. That is also covered in the constitution. There are provisions under the constitution how the revenues of the center would be distributed among the states. And there is a formula. And that formula is not a decision taken by a political executive, but a decision taken by a finance commission of experts. And all the states accept the constitutionality of the finance commission. Now, what is really required? Commitment on the part of the people, commitment on the part of the executive, commitment on the part of the legislature, and commitment also on the part of the judiciary that this excellent constitution should be allowed to work in the spirit in which it was drafted. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sukumar Oman, for giving your very, very detailed views about the federalism. I would like to highlight few things, although he has given all the details. But what he says that the constitution should work we have made this constitution is one of the best constitution in the world, but we must all, whether the state government or the central government, should see to it that it should work. And he says that India is a federal country, but it is basically a union of states. The states have joined the union. There is no formal agreement to join the federalism. He also mentioned about the judicial activism, and he has quoted 2-3 cases, and the recent cases, one was about the vaccine. He says the judiciary should understand that wherever is a policy matter, it is in the domain of the legislature, not in the domain of the judiciary. So, but he says that judiciary has overreached or and shown the activism, and they have taken that matter about the vaccine. Similarly, he mentioned about the oxygen concentrator. So all those things, he says this is a policy matters which have been taken by the duly appointed, democratically appointed government, elected government, and they are supposed to take the decisions, not the judiciary should try not to interfere in these things. He mentioned about the protest. He says protests are allowed in any of the democracy, but the protest should not be to convert the democracy to anarchy. Protest are, if you want to protest, you can protest democratically, but not to see that the government, duly elected government, you will be protesting in such a way that the democracy will convert into anarchy. He has mentioned about the GST, and he says, because he has already filed a case in the Honorable High Court of Kerala, he says there is a case which he has seen, and that in Kerala, what compensation they have received, it is far more than what the Kerala government would have collected the tax during that time. So he says that what the states are asking and putting pressure on the central government for the compensation, they must see themselves what is the condition. If they would have been in the power, they would have been collecting the tax, whether this compensation, what they have already received, is not more what they have already received than if they would have collected. So according to him, the federalism is very good, but the states and the judiciary and the central government has to work hand in hand. He says wherever we are trying to interfere in the other's domain, then the problem starts. Otherwise, this is the one of the best constitutional made, and that's why it is one of the best federalism in the world. Thank you very much, Mr. Sukumar Oman, for giving your views. I must say that you have explained in a very easy way, so the viewers might be enlightened about what is the duties of the central government and the state government in the federalism. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Colonel S. Dinny, retired. Colonel S. Dinny is a contemporary writer now based at Kollam. Colonel Dinny served as an Indian Army Infantry Rajput Regiment officer for more than 20 years. He has first-hand combat operational experiences after having served in multiple tenures in Kashmir Valley, Northeast India, and along the line of actual control in Ladakh. In Kashmir, he served for 8 years, both along the line of control and in Rashtriya Rifles. He served as a military observer with United Nations in Congo. He commanded an infantry battalion at Penangong, Taso for 2 years. After command of battalion, he was nominated for the prestigious Higher Defense Management course. He was posted as a faculty in Defense Services Staff College, DSSC, Wellington, Tamil Nadu. He took voluntary retirement from the army. He is Masters in Defense and Strategic Studies from Madras University. He completed a graduate certificate course in Strategic Studies from Takshila Institution, Bangalore. He undertook the Kautilya Fellowship Program with India Foundation. Currently, he is pursuing MPhil in Defense and Strategic Studies from Madras University. He contributes articles in many publications as well as in digital media such as Dinalipi.com, Swarajya, The Print, Rediff.com, USI Publications, Moneycontrol.com, and Malayalam newspapers. He participated in various panel discussions in English, Hindi, and Malayalam on TV channels and also on online website. Welcome, Colonel S. Dini on our show. Colonel S. Dini, you have heard what Dr. C.V. Anand Bose as well as what Mr. Sukumar Onam has mentioned. And they have given the details about the federalism, the challenge and response. Now, we would like to know your views on the federalism, challenge and response. Colonel S. Dini, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, for once again hosting me in your show. And it's also a proud privilege to be part of a panel with Mr. Sukumar Uman and Mr. Ananda Bose and Srimati Padmaja Menon. While I was just thinking about this topic, federalism, challenge and response. So when we look at challenge, I gave it a thought that is the challenge current, or was the challenge does it have a historical background also? If it has a historical background, did the makers of a constitution, did they take care of it? Did they perceive that there will be a challenge? And if so, what all did they do? And also then what was the aspect of response is what we will look at in the current scenario. Now, having said that, let me just make a quick comment that the federal system or federalism as far as India is concerned is not a classical federalism. As Mr. Oman also rightly mentioned that it is in Article 1, it says that India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. And it is a product of coming together of states to form the Federal Union of India rather than a conversion of a unitary system into a federal system. What I'm trying to say is that when the Union of India was formed, it was many units coming together to form one unit. And the basic function of this particular federalism is that, like it was mentioned earlier, it is an indestructible union involving destructible subunits or units. What I say is that indestructible union is the Indian state, which cannot be destroyed, but the states within India can be, the shape or the size and all those things can be changed even without the permission or the concurrence of the state. So inherently, there has been a bias towards the Union of India in the constitution itself. Although we say we are a federal state, through the constitution, when the constitution was framed, there was an inherent bias towards the Union of India. That is what we must understand, that bias was always there. And why it was always there was that the makers of a constitution knew that if the Indian state has to remain together, then a strong central government is a matter of absolute necessity. This was also during once we go through the discussions in the Constituent Assembly. It's very clear that even like people like Pandit Nehru, Dr. Ambedkar, everybody believed that a strong central union government is absolute necessary for the integrity of India. So that was the first basis. So we must understand this, because at times in today's scenario, many of the people think that federalism means both state and central government are together or almost on the equal platform. No, you actually cannot compare both. Both have got a different role to play. Both have their charter well defined in the constitution. However, there is an inherent bias of the Union of India, which is higher than the state government. I can give you many more examples. Examples are like the framing of it is one constitution, one nation. The states do not have any other constitution. Then you have the resource allocation. The resource allocation, as was mentioned by both the previous speakers, lies with the primary responsibility of the central government or union government. Then you have the issue of, as I mentioned, the redrawing or drawing of the state boundaries is the responsibility of the Union of India. So even without the concurrence of the state, a state can be formed, as was seen in the recent Telangana state which was formed. So what I'm trying to say is that this fact, we must understand that we are a quasi federalism. We are not a classical federalism. We are what I will call as a holding together federalism. We are more of a federal state which wants to hold together the state, and within that, the constitution has brilliantly given everybody their own task and such like things. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that when I look at the challenges and what we see today, a historical perspective will be, in the right spirit to understand that this particular thing is not what is, currently what we are seeing. It has always been there. This tussle between central and state, this tussle between judiciary and all those things. And the brilliant part was the makers of our constitution had visualized this, and that is how this constitution still holds in whatever form it is. Now I'll just quickly go through the, how this federalism has from 1947 till date, how it has shifted in various stages, which will put things in perspective, and then we'll understand that, okay, this was not something which is happening, just about post 2014 or something like that. Let's go to the first phase. The first phase from 1947 to 1967. I call it, many of the scholars also call it the one-party federalism. We all know that the Indian National Congress was the most dominant party in that, with Pandit Nehru being at the helm of affairs, and lot of Congress leaders at the state level also were, held in high esteem in their own right. So what happened was, at the state state level there were leaders, at the national level there was Pandit Nehru. So there was a fair bit of state and union coexistence was there, and overall it was one party federalism which was there. However, in the same period there were also demand for certain states based on languages. So that language demand also was there. So there was an initial reluctance that there should not be any state based on language. But however, slowly but steadily, because of growing demand, as the state leaders were also of prominent nature, that demand was given. And same for one language, that there was resentment on one language being imposed on the state. Like for example, there was a lot of backlash on Hindi being given importance in a state like Tamil Nadu and all. But then still it survived, and that entire phase, from what I call 1947 to 1967, that the one party federalism state continued. And 67, we know that the Indian National Congress suffered the reverses, and that brought about the start of the second phase from 1968 to 1989, which we can call it as the expressive federalism. What happened during this particular period was that there was a political challenge to the Indian National Congress, and there were strong regional forces which now had come into prominence. So what happened is, there is again that tussle which is there, and the regional forces started expressing themselves more. And during the same period, we also saw excessive use of Article 356 to remove the states which were ruled during at that particular point of time. And as earlier, the regional demands now started rising even more. And at the national level, there were also efforts of reconciliation, especially in the state like Jammu and Kashmir and such like places. There were efforts of reconciliation, like what we all know, the Delhi Accord and all those things. So this particular thing also finished by 1989. Now after 1989, the third phase, which started from around 1990, and it moved right up till 2014. So this particular stage, what we can, or the phase we can call it, is the multi-party federalism. What happened is that the Indian National Congress at the national level was completely weakened, and there was creation of a coalition government with the support or with the the backup of regional parties, including the communist parties and all we know. During the same period, the economic reforms was unleashed into the country, and now the states had greater financial autonomy. Now each of the states wanted to benefit from the economic liberalization which has happened. So you found that there's a resurgent Gujarat, or there was a vibrant Gujarat, the Kerala model and the Haryana model. All these people now are trying to attract a lot of foreign investments as things, so that the states now had a more and more of the financial autonomy, which was till now it was not there. So that also happened. Similarly, there was also a judicial check on the use of Article 356. I think Mr. Sukumar will be knowing. I think this is the Bombay case in which that use of Article 356 was now contested by the judiciary. The Supreme Court said that you can't be using Article 356 indiscriminately. So there was a sense of a little bit of caution was there for the use of Article 356. And most importantly, this was also the period when the local body, the Panchayati Raj Act and all those things came into being, and you found a new form of governance at the grassroots level, which again, in a way strengthened the federal concept. And this also added to that multi-party federalism. So this phase ended with about 2014. This particular phase ended, and then from 2014 till date, what we can call is the return of the dominant party federalism. What happened initially, the same case is the rise of the BJP as a dominant party at the national level. And although Mr. Modi, who was himself a chief minister, and who believes in the concept of the cooperative federalism, and that is why he created the Niti Aayog, The GST Council, of course, the GST Council and all those things. There are a lot of debates still happening. How much of revenues and what all, which Mr. Woman also was mentioning too. So all those things are happening. But this is the period in which there is a party which is dominant at the national level. Also, what we see is there is a rise of regional political parties and leaders who are dominating state politics. For example, Odisha, in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu now we see. So these parties are also now having a major say in their respective state politics. So this is this is the same time when we see the rise of national federalism, if I can put it in that way. Why do I say national federalism? Is that whenever there's a cause which involves a nation, there is at least there are states which would like to be seen as part of the national federalism. For example, when there was a Chinese attack, there was the criticism and opposition from Indian National Congress, but there were people like the Odisha chief minister who was in full support. Similarly, is the case even now. When there's a national cause, there are people who want to support. Even for that matter, Arvind Kejriwal being such a big opponent of the Prime Minister Modi, but when it comes to many other, for example, the agriculture bill and such, the CA bill and all, he took a little bit neutral stand and also which now feels that towards the nationalism cause, you can change your political stand also. So this is how it was there. And finally, the crucial role of states during this pandemic also we can see during this particular thing, which again brought back the focus of this entire debate on federalism. That how does the Union Government of India deal with the situation like pandemic? The health is a state subject, but pandemic is a national disaster. So there were debates, and now we know that the vaccination was initially centralized, then the state governments wanted decentralized. It was given to them, and now after problems which they face, now again it has gone back and it has now become a centralized thing. So we see a debate, an ongoing process, a churning as far as even the federal concept when this pandemic is also. I think the more and more lessons will come out of this as we go ahead. So this broadly is the academic debate which has been happening throughout our independent history. So from 1947 till date, this debate on federalism, the resource allocations, the whose jurisdiction is all this, these all debates have been continuing. I foresee in the future also this as a healthy democracy, these kind of debates will continue and all those things will continue. Now I want to touch upon the aspect of political aspect in this particular issue of federalism. Now what we see of late is that threat to federalism has become a cliche for politicians who are on the back foot. If any politician is on the back foot, he can just say, okay, this particular step is a threat to federalism. He will immediately he or she will immediately take a stand that this is a threat to federalism and I can't be questioned like this. That is the first aspect. So we see an increasing number of cases post 2014 of these kind of things which are happening. Secondly, every law and order problem cannot be a constitutional problem. There are law and order problems. Now, for example, if in Kerala there is a gold smuggling issue, it is a law and order issue only. It's a thing which the law has to take its own course. Now that cannot be seen as a threat to federalism if the ED comes and does investigations. Similarly, Mamata Banerjee, if somebody, if a CBI goes and raids a particular place, that cannot be seen as a threat to the government of West Bengal. No, it is a particular thing of a particular case involving a particular individual. So now we see this huge number of, everything which is a law and order issue being seen as a constitutional issue. So that is another thing which is purely political in nature. But what concerns me immensely is the issue of national security. While our ancestors, when they framed the constitution, when they thought through it, and I think the national security was of paramount importance, based on which the integrity of our nation all depends on. That's why a lot of emphasis was given on the national security issue. But when in the current scenario, what we are seeing increasingly is just to satisfy their own, some of the political constituents, some of the leaders are taking up extreme views, which, in my opinion, can harm our nation in the long run. And that, I think, according to me, is the threat to federalism. I don't want to give any specific examples because it is a debate in itself. But there are many issues whether it is, you can, there are so many issues right in front of us which is there, but increasingly the leaders, today's political leaders, feel that they can make a statement, they can make a protest, they can support some cause, some group of people who have an inherent anti-India stand, and yet get away with either freedom of expression or under federalism, this is my rule, this is my right. So this again is a political debate which is new in the current scenario. Finally, I'll just end that when we in India, there are about there are 6 conflicting pillars of federalism in India which we need to understand, and it has to be upheld at all times. Like what they say in Bhagavad Gita, that there are opposites, always there are opposites, and that whosoever maintains the balance in that opposites is a person who will do, who is always revered. This 6 pillars of federalism is national integration, autonomy of states. Number 2, 3, centralization, decentralization, and 5 and 6 is nationalization and regionalization. So a balance of all these things is what is our federalism. So all these concepts have to be taken into mind, and then our constitution, as the architects of a constitution, what they visualize, I think that is what we will see in the future also. So all these things have to be understood in the context it is, and in my understanding, that there is enough strength in a constitution to withstand all this. However, there is also a need for the political leaders to be very, to have some sort of responsibility towards them, just not just think of political gains, but also about the nation as such.
Thank you very much, Colonel Dinny, for giving your views. And Colonel Dinny has highlighted many points. I will just summarize them. First thing he says, undoubtedly, the constitution is tilted towards the central government or the union government. It's biased. And he says it's biased because at that time they know that the country, if the country has to be united, all the states have to see to it that they are united under the umbrella of a central government. He also mentioned that as per our constitution, if we will study properly, the union government is having upper hand than the state government. So to say that the state government and the union governments are on the same foot, no, it's not like this. According to Colonel Dinny, the union government's upper hand is always there as far as the federalism is concerned. And he has given the details about how the federalism started from 1947 onwards. And he says at the time of Nehru time, so many things have happened. Even he mentioned about the protest against the languages, when everybody wanted the language to make the state according to the language, and a particular state should have a particular language. The Hindi protest against Hindi also was there. Then he mentioned from 1968 to 89 time, when according to Colonel Dinny, the misuse of Article 356, where the duly elected governments has been removed, state governments by the central government. And then he says that from 1990 to 2014, the judicial has come, the judiciary has started putting pressure on the central government, including the misuse of 356. He says at that time the Panchayat Raj has been introduced, and the Panchayat has become so now. So that the federalism, which is started from the center to the state, now the Panchayat is also there. And now he says after the 2014, because again there is a strong person at the center, so Niti Aayog has been formed, GST Council has been formed, but the regional parties have started putting pressure on the government on many aspects, in which he has given the present scenario, the context of the West Bengal, where the CBI has raided a few of the officers there, and then the government says it's an attack on the federalism. But he says, according to him, the national security is the most important thing, and one must understand whenever there is a national threat, all states have to come together along with the union government to see that the national security should not be compromised. Thank you very much, Colonel Dinny, for giving your views. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and she is Miss Padmaja Menon. Miss Padmaja S. Menon is the managing trustee of Mitra Equal Opportunity Trust, Cochin. Miss Padmaja was awarded the Best Woman Journalist of India in the year 1988 by Eve's Weekly of Times of India. She represented India in the World Seminar on Communication Without Words for Girls Guides held in Switzerland. She also won the President's Award in Girl Guiding. She was the Rotary International Group Study Exchange member to Tennessee in US. The Tennessee government honored her by awarding honorary citizenship. She was the inner wheel chairman of District 320. She anchors program for various channels. She is also the central government nominee on Kerala State Social Welfare Board. Welcome, Ms. Padmaja S. Menon on our show. Ms. Padmaja, you have heard what earlier guest, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, Mr. Sukumar Omen, as well as Colonel Dini has spoken. Now, we would like to know from you the federalism challenges and response. Ms. Padmaja S. Menon, please. Please unmute.
Yes. President Mr. Goel, panelists Mr. C.V. Ananda Bose IAS, Mr. Sugumar Uman IAS, Colonel S. Dini, good morning to you all. Let me try to explain what is federalism. In a federation system, as we know, there are two seats of power that are autonomous in their own spheres. And there are two kinds of federations. Holding together federation as in India, Spain, Belgium, etc., where powers are shared between various constituent parts to accommodate the diversity of in the whole entity. Here, the powers are generally tilted towards the central authority. Coming together federation as in USA, Australia, Switzerland, etc., where independent states come together to form a larger unit. Here, states enjoy more autonomy as compared to the holding together kind of federation. Though India is a federal system, it has a more tilt towards unitary system of government. It is sometimes considered a quasi-federal system as it has features of both a federal and unitary system. Article 1 of the Indian Constitution states that India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. The word federation is not mentioned in the Constitution. Elements of federalism were introduced into modern India by the Government of India Act of 1919, which separated powers between the center and the provincial legislatures. Main federal features of Indian Union are, we have government at two levels, center and states. Division of powers between center and states. There are three lists given in the 7th schedule of the Constitution, as speakers were saying before, which gives the subjects, each level has jurisdiction in Union list, which has 97 items, state list, which has 66 items, and concurrent list, which has 52 items. It has an independent judiciary with district courts, high courts at state level, and Supreme Court of India. All courts are subordinate to the Supreme Court. The basic structure of Constitution is indestructible as laid out by the judiciary. The Constitution is the supreme law of India. Let us take health as an example, which is very close to my heart because being a public person, I always work with the people and they are really bothered about the health aspect since it's very, very expensive in private sector, especially in Kerala, it's very, very expensive and people are very upset the way the COVID disease has come up and it's costing them a lot of money, okay? Though health is under state list, COVID proved how dependent India's states are on center. Despite public health being a state subject, the central government is the key factor in designing health policies and programs. In January 2020, the high-level group or HLG formed for the health sector by the 15th Finance Commission has said that health must be transformed to the concurrent list of the Indian Constitution from the state list, since issues like medical education and family planning comes under concurrent list. So health should also be brought under concurrent list, the HLG reported. Here, I would like to say that some states have refused to accept central schemes in toto or otherwise according to the requirement. Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Bharat, which is one scheme which is appreciated by world over. It's got, if you are in the BPL category, a family with 4 members are given this treatment help of 5 lakh rupees per annum. Per annum. Next year also they are entitled for that, and they can take it in deferred treatments for different people. The Kerala government said no to that system, and the central government, since they have the list of the ration card holders, they send directly to the ration card holders that you are eligible for this benefit, and they can go to the nearby states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh and avail treatments. But Kerala government said no. So after a lot of pressure by the central government and the public, then they accepted it just last year. So this is what is happening if some things are given in the state list, which is very important, like the health issue. And the thing is that the central government comes out with many insurance schemes. For example, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Suraksha Bima Yojana, in which people up to the age of 70 can be the beneficiary. This is supposed to be the largest such insurance scheme in the whole world, which is only 12 rupees for an insurance policy for a year. And then Suraksha Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, in which one has to pay only 330 rupees to get insured, and his nominee will get 2 lakhs once after his demise. So many things at the central level are happening. So it is better that these things are brought into the concurrent list, wherein the government, the state and the central has a unity together. So in a federal system, the state list, the concurrent list, and the national list, the central list, which has to work together, then only the people will get the ultimate benefit. Also, now we can see some things like the IAS officers. We have got 2 IAS officers in our panel, and also a colonel. Those are all in the central system. Like the colonel was mentioned, what's happening in West Bengal now? As chief secretary, who is an IAS officer who comes under the center, he is being told by the chief minister that no, he cannot leave the state. So these are disputes which is arising from the center and state tussle. So these things also have to be sorted out. The constitution definitely says where to draw the line, but sometimes in the states, in the anxiety to make people believe that we are the supreme power, especially when in Kerala, where the CPM rules, where they have the allegiance towards another, we feel, we don't know. Like take the example of the Union Territory Lakshadweep. It all, the Union Territories come under the central list, okay? The states do not have any right, just because they, Lakshadweep stays very close to Kerala, they have their administrative office in Kerala. But the Kerala government believes that it's part of Kerala, and they're creating a lot of problem against the Lakshadweep administrator who is being appointed by the center. How can you say just because Lakshadweep, the Andaman and Nicobar Island is accessible easily by from West Bengal or from Tamil Nadu, it's they decide the fate of what has to be done in Andaman Nicobar Islands. So these things are of concern to the people. The center has to step in at the right time and curb such indulgence by the state government. And also the education is in the concurrent list. But now in the during because of the COVID pandemic, the children are finding it very difficult to study through the online system. Most of them do not have the study material, that's the tab or the computer or the TV. So the government, both the state and the center government has to butt in and support the people. And during pandemic situations, the article, the constitution says it is the duty of the center to make sure that all the citizens have enough food for sustenance. The center is doing that. So these things, both the as the constitution writers has envisaged, both the center and the state has to hold hands and work for the betterment of the people, that is the citizens of India. That's what I have to say about the challenges.
Thank you very much, Ms. Padmaja, for giving your views. And what Ms. Padmaja has mentioned, she says that both the center and the state government has to hold the hands together to see that the country will be together. And she has mentioned about the very important aspect about the health. And she says the health is very expensive, and especially because she belongs to Kerala. So she has mentioned about the Kerala. And she says because the health is in a state list, and what is happening, the state is not giving the proper treatment or the proper facilities to the citizens of Kerala. She mentioned about how the private facilities in the Kerala medical facilities are very expensive, as well as she says that the Kerala government resisted for implementing the Ayushman Bharat, which was released by the government of India, because they do not wanted that particular scheme, which was very beneficial for the public at large. But after that, lots of pressure from the central government as well as the public, the last year only they have started accepting that particular scheme. She says, even she has mentioned about the insurance schemes, many insurance schemes the central government has proposed or implemented in other states. The Kerala government or the many of the states resisted, because, and that's why she says that the health and many other subjects should be transferred to the concurrent list, not from the state list, and then the things can be more smooth. She has also given the reference of the West Bengal, what has happened about the thing recently. She also mentioned about the Lakshadweep, how, and she asked how the Kerala government can object, which is not in their domain. It is the central government domain to appoint any administrator or not to appoint. So that is the thing. So according to Ms. Padmaja, both state and the central government has to work together to make this country great. Thank you very much, Ms. Padmaja, for giving your views. Now I would like to ask the question to Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, you have heard everyone and you have given your views also. Now my question to you is, when so much conflict of interest between the state and the center, which our panelist has also mentioned, are there, what are the checks and balances to tackle such type of situation? Dr. Bose, please.
I think the answer to that question lies in the topic which you have suggested today: federalism, challenge and response. I think any dynamic society moves between challenge and response. This is a favorite expression used by Arnold Toynbee. You know, Chinese say about yin and yang. I think all progressive societies move from the yin to the yang, or if there is a challenge, there is a response. I think we have a built-in system which can give the response, the right response to the challenges. Having said it, I would like to be brief and bring to you one of the repeated, oft-repeated, perhaps, Yoruba tales. You know, among the Yorubas of Nigeria, there is a practice. When a young man becomes a youth, he is subjected to a test. He is tied to a tree inside a dense forest. The whole night he has to be there. There are wild animals roaming around. Anything can happen to him. And he started cursing. How can my father allow this? How can my tribal chiefs allow this? Tying me to a tree and leaving me in the forest alone with the wild animals roaming around. Early morning, he is untied from the tree and he sees that his father was standing near him with a raised up axe, and behind the father were the tribal leaders, all with drawn swords to protect him. This is federalism. The union government is there with a raised up axe to save the people, to save democracy, to save we the people who gave the constitution. And behind him, that is the prime minister, are the chief ministers with drawn swords to protect federalism. I think if there is a challenge, there is a response. India is a mature democracy. In spite of the superficial and maybe even deep fissions that occasionally come up, India has the strength to stand as one. Janda unja rahe hamara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose. Now, and you have mentioned Janda uncha rahe hamara. Yes, we all are for that. Thank you very much. Now, my question goes to Mr. Sukumar Omen. Mr. Omen, do you think federalism will survive in India, or it will give rise to more centralized administration?
I don't see a contradiction between federalism and centralization. No, we have 28 states, 8 union territories now. And many of our states have international borders. The problems that the states face can be encountered firmly only by a strong government at the center. There should be no compromise on this matter, that we do need a strong central government. And when we have a strong central government, the underlying philosophy is that we, the people, we want a strong central government. We don't want a weak government. We must be conscious of the problems that the country faces, and there must be a maturity which will force us to accept the need for a strong government. I do not subscribe to the view, and I think there would be many people who would endorse this. I do not subscribe to the view that agitation should continue indefinitely against the central government. Democracy, as I mentioned earlier, should not degenerate to anarchy. And democracy cannot be converted to a form of oligarchy. Democracy should be democracy. I will say strong, a centralized form of government as it exists in the Constitution, and the federal concept as it is in the Constitution, with the distribution of powers clearly defined and the role of the different organs of government clearly defined, that will prevail. It will continue. There's another interesting aspect. Mr. Dini mentioned about different phases of federalism. During the first phase of federalism, he mentioned up to 1967, the level of literacy in the country was pathetically low. Post 2014, level of literacy also has risen, which means if today the people vote a particular government, it's an informed choice. It's not a choice where people have been coerced or bribed. It's an informed choice, and that informed choice will prevail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Oman. Now my question goes to Colonel Dini. Colonel Dini, do you think an amendment in the Constitution is required to put all the people in place together without, so that there should be no handling of the politics between the state and the center? 1 minute, please.
Absolutely. In fact, I can answer in one word: no.
Yeah.
Not required, because the issue is that the Constitution is, as I mentioned earlier, and all my previous speaker also mentioned, the Indian Constitution is good enough to withstand all kind of pressures. The only thing which I would like as an advice to the political leaders is what I call the PLDC, permissible limit of democratic churning. You know what Mr. Oman also mentioned. There is a permissible limit. We should not cross that, and our nation will be safe.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Padmaja, any suggestion you want to give to the government, central government and state government, so that there will be a good harmony among them?
Okay. Let the center and the state stick to the roles envisaged for them. Let them work hand in hand. Let it be Kerala, Tamilian, Kashmiri. We are all Indians basically, and we do carry Indian passport. We do not have dual citizenship in India. If states flourish, then only India as a nation will flourish. So let us work together, stick together, and be happy together.
Be happy together, says Ms. Padmaja. Thank you very much. So today, viewers, you have seen the views of all the experts are very, very clear. In spite of all odds, in spite of differences between state and the central government, our constitution is one of the best constitution, and it happens always that whatsoever differences are there, they can be sorted out constitutionally, legally, without interference of anyone else, and no constitution amendment is required. Yes, some things are required, minor changes are required in the list, etc., which can be done. Thank you very much. Today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon se Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor is to bring to you every day new topic. But for last 1 month, we have started an evening program of half an hour where we call an achiever and take his or her life journey, about the life journey, and enlighten our viewers. And under the program is called Kal Aaj Aur Kal Lal Goel Ke Sang at 4:30 p.m. And today our chief guest is Mr. Devendra Chaudhary, Executive Director of Aqua Plumbing Private Limited, Mathura. He will be giving and telling about how he has reached on such a top in a very short time and what is his life journey. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose. Thank you very much, Mr. Sukumar Omen. Thank you very much, Colonel Dini. Thank you very much, Ms. Padmaja S. Menon. And thank you all the viewers for watching our show, today's very, very enlightening show. Thank you very much.